But I want you to go back to starting with Samudra Manthan, going back to the ancient archaeology in Prayagraj. What are the sites there commemorating these mythologies that one can visit?
So we certainly can map it. And what's interesting is that the texts enable you to map the Samudra Manthan onto Prayagraj before the explicit association of Kumbh and the Kumbh Mela. Mm-hmm. So, for example, Vasuki. Mm-hmm. So the Nag Vasuki Mandir, which I visited a few weeks ago, is halfway up Kumbh Nagar, the Mela site. It's on a raised part of land. It's on a sort of mound, and the waters of Ganga flow past it. So you have a mound and you have a Vasuki Mandir right at the point where you could churn the waters.
Right.
And some of the sanitation at some of the Glastonbury Fest, I'm sure it's better now. But anyway, the sanitation, Portaloos I'm talking about, etc., at Prayagraj was better than many of the Glastonbury festivals. Yes. They had lakhs, at least a lakh, I think, of Portaloos. I saw certainly thousands. And they were cleaner inside than many of the Portaloos that I have had to use at Glastonbury Festival over the years, just by virtue of the fact that they were being regularly cleaned. Perhaps people were even more respectful, dare I say.
Hello, everyone. Welcome to another episode of Don't Run Into Glass. I'm Anika and Getty's not here again. I hope you guys are getting your flu shot because everyone seems to be getting a terrible flu all over. But today you'll just have to bear with me. We have an amazing episode scheduled today with someone who has gone to the Kumbh and had 6 Snaans over there. I like any episode with history and archaeology, and I hope this is a lot about that, where we speak about the Mahakumbh, something that happens in India. It's the largest human gathering of the world, and we have with us Nick. Hi, Nick. Thank you for joining us.
Namaskar, Anika ji. Great to be here.
Nick, just to start off, just to get to know you better, tell us a little bit about what brought you to India before we discuss the Kumbh. What brought you to India of all the places to settle down in? Because you live here now, right?
I certainly do. I've lived here for 17 years. My wife, Meetu, is from Delhi, and we brought up our daughter here in this fabulous city. Fun fact, your wonderful podcast is called Don't Run Into Glass.
Yes.
When I was 16, I ran into glass. So I have a crooked bottom tooth because I was, for context, I was playing Hamlet in a school production. And on the night of the first performance, I ran into the local town and there was a shop called Woolworths and I wanted to get a Lucozade, which is basically an energy drink, Red Bull of England. And I ran into the shop and little did I realize that the automatic doors were not automatic doors and they were panes of glass. And I smashed right into them, knocked my tooth back, covered in blood. I did get the Lucozade and I did perform the role of the prince.
That is hilarious because our story of Don't Run Into Glass is us, Getty and me, in the middle of the night running into glass in London.
Oh, wow.
Yes.
Amazing.
Right next to Trafalgar Square at a Pret, we thought the same story. We thought that the door was open and we're like, we need a sandwich. And we ran into that glass. And the next morning we get up with like crazy bumps on our head and then we call it Don't Run Into Glass. But it also means getting to know a subject matter and not running into glass thinking you know it.
Yeah, well, plenty of that regarding Kumbh. Please be careful with glass doors in England. That's the moral of the story.
Correct. Moral of today's story. But let's get into what brought you here. What fascinated you of all places, other than your wife, obviously?
Well, so I actually met my wife here. I'd already been in India for a couple of years before we met in Delhi. But essentially, I was in my mid-20s. I had graduated from a philosophy degree, nothing to do with Indian philosophy, even though it was called philosophy. Should have been called Western philosophy. And I therefore knew very little about India. A lot of my friends had traveled to India, backpackers, gap years, school holidays, university holidays, that kind of thing. But I had never, ever been really that interested. And then when I was about 25, I had a sort of existential crisis, sensing that things were not exactly going that well in Britain, Europe, the Western world. And on many levels, I've felt that it was unsustainable, psychologically, spiritually, economically, financially, politically. And I wanted to be positive because I'm a naturally kind of optimistic person. So I looked at everywhere in the world I could think of that might be interesting and exciting and important in the 21st century. And I particularly was asking myself the question, where in 2050 will be the most important place in the world? And on all of my criteria, after 6 months of desktop research, and no more than that, I really, it was like, China, Turkey, Argentina, Silicon Valley, Australia, New Zealand, India. And on almost every criteria, in fact, I think pretty much on everything, India came out number one. Demographics, population, civilization, philosophy, English speaking, free speech, rule of law, love of technology. And all of these criteria, scale, complexity, diversity, creativity, innovation, on everything, I was just like, India's obviously the future. So I got a one-way ticket to India. And that's why I came here in 2006 or 7. I can't quite remember which.
Almost 19 years, yeah?
Yeah, it's 17 years. Mm-hmm. And then I met my wife, me too, in 2008. And we got engaged and married in 2009 and never looked back.
Oh, wonderful. And I believe you have children here and you're fully ingrained into everything that you do in India. I believe you work with education as well over here?
Yes. So my day job is helping universities and governments engage with India. So that means helping people learn about India through scholarship programs. My wife and I, we set up a business called Indogenius. And essentially, we run scholarship-supported programs to help foreign students learn about India. And as a result of that, we've been advising universities on their strategies for India, whether it be everything from setting up campuses to collaborations with Indian institutions to research projects, and then ourselves delivering these short courses, 1 to 6 weeks, traveling around India, using India's villages and cities as our classroom, giving children, students from around the world, the chance to meet their peers at Indian universities, from NIDs to IITs to Manipols to Christ's to Joseph's, Ahmedabad University, we've all over the country. And we bring our 9-year-old daughter with us. So our daughters traveled the length and breadth of India, meeting NGOs, visiting hospitals, going to tech companies, startups, government offices, and of course, universities and schools as well. And we're incredibly lucky to do what we do.
I love that. There's just so many stories in there. But one of the stories that I just can't wait to get into is the Mahakumbh. 6 Snaans.
6
right?
Snaans, yes.
3 visits.
No flu shots, 6 Snaans.
Oh my goodness. So it works. So the water works.
I can't resist.
Well,
that's not a recommendation.
What initially drew you to the Mahakumbh Mela for the first time? And tell us a little bit more about your first experience going there.
It's hard to articulate why I wanted to go because it's been such a deep-seated yearning for so long. I am sure that growing up in England in the 80s, in the 90s, I will have probably seen Sir Mark Tully, reporting from the Kumbh Mela on BBC. I will have seen glimpses on some Nat Geo documentary. We will have seen, obviously, photographs of sadhus and their dreadlocks in the waters. There is everyone in the world, I think, has probably seen an image related to Kumbh Mela, either the sadhus or the crowds or the Snaans, and therefore that was always there in my head and my heart as something that I wanted to experience firsthand. Now, when I came to India, the first Mahakumbh Mela that I had the opportunity to go to would have been 2013, and I was very much planning on doing that, but various things happened and I wasn't able to make it that January, February. And I've been incredibly disappointed and regretting. If there's one thing I regretted over the last 10 years that I haven't had a chance to do in India, that it was a kind of once in a lifetime opportunity, it was going that 2013 year. And therefore I absolutely wanted to make sure that I could go this year and that I could go as often as I could. So I am grihast, I'm a householder, I have responsibilities here in the big city with a family and work. So I knew I couldn't do a full kalpvas for the month of Magh. and I couldn't stay there for the full 6 weeks as much as I would like to. But I have managed to spend 15 nights in Prayagraj. I have managed to take 6 snans, as you say. I've made 3 visits, 6 train journeys between Delhi and Prayagraj, return trips. And one of those, I was able to take my wife and daughter and friends and family. So I'm incredibly privileged that I've been able to experience this in many different ways over the last month and a half.
Amazing. Growing up in a country outside India with a certain upbringing, and then coming to a country like India, obviously the cultures are so significantly different, right? What stood out to you? What cultural differences stood out to you when you first went to the Mahakumbh, or on all your subsequent visits as well? I mean, what is the biggest human gathering in a place that, other than Kumbh, that you may have experienced outside of the country?
So, funnily enough, I grew up, and we still, my family home is in Somerset, where Glastonbury Festival is.
Oh, wow.
So I've grown up with Glastonbury Festival. Now, Glastonbury, in some ways, is described as the India of England, in the sense that...
Is it?
Yeah, it's got lots of yoga, meditation, hippies, alternative living, Ayurveda, incense, shops selling cotton fabrics and block prints from India. A lot of people who go to Goa, Glastonbury would be a kind of like a pairing in terms of journeys. And it has this mystical element to it, associated with this Glastonbury tour. Now, next to that is where the festival is. So the festival rubs off on the culture of Glastonbury, the local town, which has thousands of years of history, and in fact, the oldest remains of a street, archaeological fact for you, the oldest remains of a street in Europe are in the marshes of Somerset Levels. So there's wood that's been laid down as a way of traversing, and that's, I can't remember. Oh, I'm going to say 6,000 years old. It's incredibly old. Double check that. But it's certainly many thousands of years BC. So Glastonbury Festival is a few 100,000 people, and I went there many times. It's run by a family that's associated with a school that I went to. So a lot of us, used to my brother volunteering jobs, and backstage and on stage with Oasis, and in the mosh pit with Foo Fighters in 1994, and all sorts of kind of like interesting experiences in crowds in an intense environment, often involving water, though not rivers, but rainfall and mud. And one of the first differences that I would suggest between Glastonbury Festival, if we're going to make this, and Kumbh Mela, is that one of the geniuses of Kumbh is that Prayagraj is the sandy banks of Ganga. And sand is a brilliant foundational material on which to build a temporary city. So you have sand, and then for the Kalpvasis, those who are staying there for up to a month, they put straw on the top of the sand, some of them plastic sheeting, blankets. So you can really live and sleep actually on the ground. Or you can put metalled sheets down to create metalled roads, which is what the government's done. Incredible logistics, organizing this temporary city with roads going across. You can build structures, tents, pandals, dwars, enormous structures going several stories height, 30 feet in the air on the sand. You can build pontoon bridges. So the actual the geography of Prayagraj is ideal for hosting a temporary city. That is not true for Glastonbury or for Woodstock or for many of these other European and Western festivals, because soil and grass, and particularly the kind of climate that you get there, means that you often end up with mud and slipping and sliding. And some of the sanitation at some of the Glastonbury festivals, I'm sure it's better now. But anyway, the sanitation, portaloos I'm talking about, etc., at Prayagraj was better than many of the Glastonbury festivals. Yes. They had at least a lakh, I think, of portaloos. I saw certainly thousands. And they were cleaner inside than many of the portaloos that I have had to use at Glastonbury Festival over the years, just by virtue of the fact that they were being regularly cleaned. Perhaps people were even more respectful, dare I say, at the Prayagraj, at the Kumbh Mela ones. So yeah, there was some mess, of course, but generally speaking, actually, that was one aspect. It was well managed. But more important than all of that, that's all the kind of actually, in some respects, superficial or mundane aspects of the differences. Why do people go to Glastonbury Festival? Why do people go to Mahakumbh Mela? Why do people go on the Santiago de Compostela pilgrimage? Why do people go to Hajj? Why do people do these pilgrimages? They are doing so partly in order to have a transformative experience. So there's an individual aspect, a voyage and return. You go somewhere, you have an experience, you come back changed in some way. And also to be part of something bigger than yourself. To be with other people, and you're all in the same boat. You're all literally in the same boat on Mar Ganga, or you're all walking down the streets together, or you're walking across the banks, or you're taking a Snaan together. So there's an inclusivity and a oneness that you get in a mosh pit at a Glastonbury concert, and you get in a Snaan. But of course, there is a huge, huge, huge difference. And that is that the motivation and the drive for people going to Mahakumbh Mela is of a purity and a spiritual dimension and a respect for their ancestors and a desire to make themselves better in some way. And that is contagious to be around. So when you're walking with the Tirthyatris, with the pilgrims towards the Sangam nose, or whether you're walking for kilometers through the streets of Prayagraj before reaching the Kumbh Mela, or whether you're carefully stepping over people as they sleep on the banks of Mar Ganga, or whether you're chatting with people on a, in a daba or in a bandara or in a queue for something, you are with people who are there for a very, very beautiful purpose. Now, of course, there are some tourists, Indian as well as foreign, who are there to take photos and see, quote, the spectacle. But most people, the vast majority, particularly the millions of Kalpvasis, the million plus, perhaps 2 million sadhus, the millions of Tirthyatris who've traveled across the country, they are there for these really, really genuinely beautiful, human, rooted in values of the self, capital S, Jungian self. And when you're going to pop concert, I'm sorry, and I know we've had a couple of big ones, including British pop stars or rock stars or whatever they're called, whatever they call themselves, musicians, have played in India in the last month. I won't name them, but it's different. It's there's a lot of flash money, there's a lot of electricity, there's a lot of baser values. It's not the same thing. But when you go to a Glastonbury, or when you go to I'll name it, a Coldplay concert, there is an aspect of what it is to be human that is encouraging you to sing along, to chant, to dance collectively, to be part of a group, to even some tapasya, some like effort to reach that place, the effort that goes to going somewhere, even if it's a stadium, which is trying to tap into, and I would suggest potentially subvert in some ways for commercial interests or for other values, something which is deeply human, which is expressed in the Mahakumbh Mela in a way that was incredibly powerful and transformative to experience.
Thank you for sharing that. That's so wonderful to hear when you hear a comparative story about different human gatherings, right? And yeah, actually, you brought it to my attention in the past couple of months. The number of huge gatherings India has hosted, including international stars coming to India and having concerts all over the country, along with the Kumbh. I mean, kudos to the administration for sort of managing that. Obviously, there are many pitfalls, etc. But sociologically, just extension to your experience there, one of the things that I was very curious, because I haven't been, and I would love to go the next time around in another 12 years. But sociologically, the division of you have the Naga sadhus coming in, you have the common folk in a certain area, there's a VIP area. How was that arrangement? What was your experience of that? And did you see the initial, when the sadhus marched down? And I'm sure, I completely believe, and it gives me goosebumps every time I think of gatherings like this, the community feeling that is vibrating through something like this. It can be a very, very powerful experience. So that sociological segregation, division over there, how is that? How did you experience that over there?
Firstly, don't worry, you don't have to wait 12 years. This is an annual event.
No, I know.
I think it's really important that we all remember that the Magh Mela, there's that old Hindi phrase, Maghe Prayage. When it's Magh, you go to Prayag. So every January or February, after Posh Purnima, running up to Maghi Purnima, there is a month-long Mela, which when you see, and I've actually looked at the photos and drone shots and so on of last year's one. So this was 2024. It was not a Mahakumbh. It was just a regular Magh. It looks very similar to what we experienced. Obviously, it's smaller, but I think that's going to grow. Mm-hmm. And I think that anyone who didn't make it to Mahakumbh Mela, for whatever reason, the Magh Mela is going to be an opportunity for you to take Snaan at the Sangam, to be able to visit some of the places that we're going to end up talking about in this conversation, some of the mandirs and the Leti Hanumanji and Akshavat and some of these incredibly important places that are in Prayag, and to experience sadhus and satsangs and all that the Mahakumbh Mela has to offer, because really it is a Magh Mela. It's an annual event that just swells every 6 years with the Ardkumbhs, every 12 years with the Purnakumbhs, and Mahakumbhs as well. So don't worry. See you there in January, February. And next Magh, Maghe Prayage. Okay, so how does it work? Well, look, this is... I've been doing a lot of reading of the Prayag Mahatmyas and the Puranas, Matsya Purana, Agni Purana, Vishnu Purana, Padma Purana, Kuma Purana, Mahabharat, Tristali Setu by Narayana Bhatta of Varanasi, 16th century. Narayana Bhatta was actually the one who, with Todamal, rebuilt the Kashi Vishwanath Mandir in 1584. Then prior to that, there was the Vidyati and from Italy and the Queen Vishva. What's her name? Vishvasa Devi. Yeah, let me get it right. Queen Vishvasa Devi. So there are all of these texts which describe Magh Mela, Magh Snaan, so taking a bath in the month of Magh, Prayagraj, Prayagraj Tirtha. They describe the rituals that one should do, why one should do them, and where and how and when. Now, an overriding theme in all of those is inclusivity. Organizing Shrota Yagyas and some of the Shastric rituals are expensive. Having priests making an offering of value, it's expensive. But going to a tirtha, on a pilgrimage to a place, taking a snan in a river is essentially the cost of travel and food. So it's much more affordable, much more accessible, and everyone was welcome, regardless of Varna, Jati. Everyone was welcome in snans, and that's explicit in all of these texts. We also have Jains and Buddhists and Sikh, and as well as Hindu, Vaishnavite, Shakt. We have obviously the Shaivites as well, all participating. So these are very, very inclusive events, and the rituals are also inclusive. The organization of the Mela, of course, involves the government. So there's an element of the central government and, of course, most importantly, the UP.
The state government.
But there is also the Akhil Bhartiya Akara Parishad. So this is the council of the Akaras. So 13 Akaras. Each of them is democratically electing their own leadership, their Mahants and the Mahalandeshwars. Kailashanand Maharaj of Naranjani Akara, I had the honor of meeting. Swami Avdeshanand of Duna Akara. So you have these leadership roles, you have this council, and they collectively plan and organize many aspects of the Mahakumbh Mela. And that stretches back centuries. So you're combining in the organization secular government with district level, with these religious, spiritual Sanatan Dham orders. and they come together to organize the greatest gathering of humanity that has ever taken place. And what was extraordinary is when we were there at the beginning, every day, each Snaan was getting bigger. So the Posh Purnima and the Makar Sankranti, the crowds were just getting bigger. And then Mauni Amavasya
Just swelling.
was just enormous.
Yeah.
I mean, easily tens, if not, I don't know what the official numbers are, but it certainly felt like tens, if not 100 million people on that one day. It was, having visited other busy days, that 2 or 3 days around Mauni Amavasya was just next level. It was huge crowds going either in both directions. Because don't forget, most people visit only, many people are visiting only for one day. They're literally arriving, taking dupki, taking a Snaan, and then returning. Others are staying 1 or 2 nights. So the average, I don't know what the modal average would be, but it's probably something like 2 nights. Then you have many people who are staying for Kalpvas. So they're there for 15 or 30 days or even 45 days, sleeping very simply on straw on banks of Marganga as per the requirements of Kalpvas, eating uncooked food or one simple cooked meal, dal chawal, that they cook themselves, taking Snaan 3 times a day. Householders, typically men and women, husband and wife, often in their 50s, 60s. So it's amazing what they're doing. And there's at least a couple of million of people doing that. Mm-hmm. Then you have the sadhus, Naga sadhus, Bairagi, Vaishnavite, Shaivite, sannyasis, Udasins, followers of Nanak and Nanak's son, Sikhakaras. So collectively, you have an incredible diversity of type of participant. And then you have the millions and millions and millions of Tirthyatris, the pilgrims who are just coming for this short period of time.
That's right.
So organizing that, enabling everyone to be able to take a Snaan is an incredible feat. Now, the VIPs have really, I think, actually been intelligent and sensitive to the fact that the crowds are going to be biggest and the importance of the Snaan is most significant for the sadhus on these Shahi Amrit Snaans.
Right.
So there were not VIPs. So chief ministers, prime ministers, VVIPs were not on the days of Posh Purnima, Makar Sankranti, Mauni Amavasya, Vasant Panchami, Maghi Purnima. They were coming in between those days, so not to inconvenience either the sadhus or the Tirthyatris.
How wonderful.
Yeah, respectful. And when you think about it, if you are as powerful as some of these people are, it must have been incredibly tempting to say, right, if Mauni Amavasya is the most auspicious Snaan, then I want to be at the front of that, and it's my opportunity now to do it.
But
they did not do that.
Yeah.
They did not do
here.
that.
Yeah.
And they also were using, so the Arail Ghat on the southern side, they were using a Ghat by the Kila. So they were trying to keep their movements, on the one hand, easy for them to come in and out, sure. But also, on the other hand, to avoid having to inconvenience as many people as possible coming down the Sangam nose, which is obviously the most crowded and where the greatest kind of focus, the heart of the whole Kumbh. Organizing, even when there were not VIP movements, organizing crowds coming up, if a series of trains come into the station all at the same time, you can get a swell of a crowd for a temporary period. Having to divert them around checkpoints. I mean, the organization to manipulate the groups of people that are arriving into Prayagraj or trying to leave at any one time is phenomenal. And I did go to the Mailer Authority and I did speak to the police about how they're doing that using drones and CCTV and AI and obviously a lot of communication on the ground with what's happening at the checkpoints. It's a phenomenal feat of organization.
That's amazing to hear because it's been difficult to gauge how everything is being managed over there from a distance. And it's fantastic to hear the first-hand experience. But now we get into my most favorite part of this podcast. You made a brief reference to the various primary sources like the Matsya Purana, the Skanda Purana, even studying sources from Hyun Sang and Al-Biruni, who described the Mahakumbh happening during that time. And it's fantastic to hear that you've been reading these primary sources deeply to understand the significance and the historicity of the Kumbh. You know, I want you to take us back through your research to the ancient references of the Kumbh, with specific reference to the Samudra Manthan, the churning of the milk ocean that led to all creation, and how that has some archaeological and some regional significance in Prayagraj, and what sort of evidences are still there in this general area that recount these ancient ties to the Mahakumbh.
One of the extraordinary things about Prayagraj is that it has been visited by many outsiders, foreigners, people like myself, for thousands of years. So like you say, Shanzang in the 7th century, Al-Biruni or Fanny Parks, the British lady in the early 19th century, they visited Mark Twain in the late 19th century. They visited and they've described what they've seen. So we have those texts. We also have these Sanskrit and more recently Hindi texts. Now, I don't speak or write or understand Sanskrit, but I have built myself an AI app purely so that I can scan photographs of Sanskrit texts and OCR uploads and PDFs, and then transliterate, translate, and then give myself a tooltip to kind of dive into the etymology of specific words. And that's meant that I've been able to read some Sanskrit texts related to Prayagraj, which have never been translated into English before. So things like the Tristali Setu by Narayana Bhatta that I mentioned before, the introduction was translated by Richard Solomon, but the section on Prayag hadn't been. And those, the bridge to the 3 holy cities, is it's sometimes translated. Those are Gaya, Kashi, and Prayag. And Prayag is Prayagraj. It's the king of the Tirthas, and it is the place of foremost offering, Prayag. So one character that I think is going to end up being the heroine of the book that I'm working on for Kumbh Mela and has been largely forgotten, but I'm now telling everyone, oh no, maybe I shouldn't say this, is Queen Vishwasi Devi. And Vishwasi Devi was a queen of Mithila in Bihar, and she wrote this amazing book, Ganga Vakya Vali, which is a compilation of everything that had been written about Ganga, Ma Ganga, and it includes lots of references to Prayag and to Marg Snans and all of the rituals that one should do around Ganga. And she writes it in the 15th century. So hers is the earliest compilation of what's in various Puranas and other texts that I've found. Now, when you're looking at her work, or Narayana Bhatta a century later, or even some of the 18th century works, there are not references to Samudra Manthan and Prayag. So the Samudra Manthan Prayag association is only in texts in the late 19th century. And then if you read all of the Prayag Mahatmyas of the late 19th and 20th century, then Samudra Manthan is clearly there. Kumbh and Amrit being dropped in 4 locations, Nasik, Ujjain, Prayagraj, and Haridwar. But prior to that, the Samudra Manthan was associated with Haridwar in terms of the Kumbh Mela festival. However, and this has been talked about before, however, what I think is very, very important to recognize is that if you go to the Udaygiri caves and hill, which is an incredible astronomical observatory, 4th, 5th century.
Gupta period.
It is Chandragupta, the golden age of India.
Correct.
It is almost certainly where the iron pillar from Mehrauli in Delhi was originally used as a gnomon for astronomical observations. It's very close to being underneath the Tropic of Cancer.
Correct.
And therefore, you could get a direct shadow touching the feet of Vishnu on the solstice and so on.
It's a magical place with the natural cleft and everything.
Yes.
Yeah.
Very, very special place. Now, at the northern edge of that, there is a temple. And that mandir, Varaha, Vishnu, is the earliest depiction of Ma Ganga and Ma Yamuna as pillars, door jambs on the side of the entrance. Now, Ma Ganga on one side. Actually, it's on that side. If I'm inside the mandir facing out, then Ganga's here and Ma Yamuna's here. Now, that depiction of Ganga Yamuna is on many, many temples, as you would know, all over India. You find it in Ajanta, you find it in Ellora, but this is the earliest depiction, and it's Gupta. And the Guptas, early Gupta period, so Samudragupta, Chandragupta, the center of their power was Prayag. And if you ask most people, if it was a Kumbh Kropati question, where is the capital of the Gupta Empire? Almost everybody will say Patliputra. But Prayag, actually, in the early period, before they married into the Lichavi dynasty of Magad, they were a Western power, and you can determine that from various references. There's Magad, and then there's the Guptas of the Doab, and that Doab is obviously Ganga Yamuna, and in that temple you're seeing this reference. Now, it works on many levels. So you're showing the physical geographical representation of the land of their kingdom, the Doab, Ganga Yamuna. You're showing Ma Ganga, Ma Yamuna, the goddesses, the moon, the sun, as in the children of. You're seeing Ida and Pingala in terms of the nadis coming together, Sushumna, at the entrance into the mandir. And what is there between Ganga Yamuna in this 4th century mandir of the Gupta period? On the lintel above, Samudra Manthan. So for me, this is the earliest reference and association that we have. It's not in text, but it shows Samudra Manthan between Ganga and Yamuna. We know no more than that, but it's incredibly interesting to see that. Now, what is that story of Samudra Manthan, and why is it so relevant to Prayag? Well, we have mandara, we have a mound, which is then used with a pillar, and Vasuki is the snake, which is wrapped around the stick on top of this mound and is pulled by the asuras and the daityas. The daityas and the devas, daityas being a kind of asura, and the daityas, the naughty ones, the egomaniacs that just want power and glory and pleasure, are obviously being enlisted to help the devas, who will presumably use the benefits of this process to do good, to serve the community, to serve others. And out comes these 14 jewels, these ratnas, which include Lakshmiji, includes the goddess Lakshmi, includes Aravata, the elephant, includes Dhanvantari, the physician of the devas, of the gods, and includes Amrit, the elixir of mortality. So that story, for me, is a very, very powerful metaphor for Silicon Valley technology, the world that we live in. The fact that we have forces of good and evil. We have forces of good intentions and bad intentions working together to churn the ocean of technology.
Correct.
In order to generate both halahal, poison, and Amrit, elixir of mortality. And I think that in Silicon Valley, people are, seeking to, they want health, they want wealth, they want power. Some of them want it for themselves. Some of them hopefully want it to benefit others.
Yeah.
Some of their intentions are genuine. Some of them are not. Some of them are doing pacts with the devil. They're working with the daityas, with the asuras, in order to achieve their goals, because they think that that's the means to the end. There's all kinds of parallels. But who's Shiva? Who's going to drink the poison? Who's Parvati going to save Shiva? who's Mohini going to distract the Asuras so that the Amrit can come back to the Devas, to the good? I think these are all useful questions for us to consider when we're thinking about regulation of AI, or we're thinking about firewalls, or we're talking about protection, or we're talking about laws that are needed. And even the process of a large language model, in a funny way, the epochs is the churning of the ocean of all knowledge in order to produce in ChatGPT or in DeepSeek or whatever, or Krutim, in order to produce poison or pleasure. And the values model is like Shiva's neck filtering out the what should be allowed to come out of this so that we don't get the poison. So there's all sorts of powers. And I think that when you use a story like Samudra Manthan in order to kind of relate to the psychology and actual kind of literal policy making decisions that we're making now, that's really more as powerful. In fact, no, I'll go further. It is more powerful than Pandora's box. And Pandora's box is the go-to metaphor that people use. If you go to the World Economic Forum,
right,
and people are talking about AI safety a couple of weeks ago in Davos, I bet you at some point, at least once, someone said, ChatGPT, it's like opening Pandora's box.
How funny.
They did not say, it's like Samudra Manthan.
Maybe they'd say it in Asia because, Samudra Manthan is one of the most replicated, not replicated, but adopted and adapted mythologies across Southeast Asia and
Angkor
Asia.
Wat.
Absolutely. Angkor Wat, Angkor Thom. In fact, the gates of the entrance of Angkor Thom, which is a larger complex than Angkor Wat, is one temple. That is one of the largest temples in the world. And Vishnu being the main deity to be worshipped there after 200 years of Shaivism. And the most beautiful polished sandstone scene. And the number of times I have been there and wanted to go there again is cannot be quantified. But even at the entrance of Angkor Thom, which is a larger complex of a conglomerate of temples inside there, the entrance point is the Samudra Manthan. You see the dramatic Daityas or the Asuras, and then you see the serene Devas pulling the Vasuki snake. And it's so funny because, up till my teenage years, I often saw my grandmother churning milk to derive butter. Yeah. And then that same, the social habit of deriving butter out of milk, out of lassi, is something that continues in India till today. And that butter is considered like Amrit, elixir. Yeah. So in Asia, I don't know how much we use Pandora's box, but Samudra Manthan definitely from the airport to the temples is replicated. But I want this is such an interesting perspective that you shared, comparing it to the contemporary philosophies in the contemporary times. But I want you to go back to starting with Samudra Manthan, going back to the ancient archaeology in Prayagraj. What are the sites there commemorating these mythologies that one can visit?
So we certainly can map it. And what's interesting is that you can, the texts enable you to map the Samudra Manthan onto Prayagraj before the explicit association of Kumbh and the Kumbh Mela. Mm-hmm. So, for example, Vasuki. Mm-hmm. So the Nag Vasuki Mandir, which I visited a few weeks ago, is halfway up Kumbh Nagar, the Mela site. It's on a raised part of land. It's on a sort of mound, and the waters of Ganga flow past it. So you have a mound and you have a Vasuki Mandir right at the point where you could churn the waters.
Right.
You also have references to a Brahma Yupa, so a sacrificial pole, a pole of offering, Brahma's pole, which would have been right at the Sangam confluence. Correct. And that's described as the center of the Prayag mandala, which is the region which includes Nag Vasuki's mandir in the north, Samudrakupa and Pratistana on the right, on the eastern bank of Ganga, which is where the Pandavas visited. It's also where Samudragupta is said to have built this well, this kupa, or the well is so deep that it reaches the Samudra, the ocean, the saline waters, the ocean beneath the earth. And then on the south, you have Veni Madhav. Veni Madhav, the Vishnu, Brahma, Vishnu, and Shiva all reside in Prayagraj. Brahma in the north, Shiva in the center as Akshayavat, and Madhav, Vishnu, on the southern bank of the confluence. And the Adiveni Madhav Mandir, which I've also been to, what was extraordinary is that when I went in there, there's 2 Veni Madhav temples. There's 12 Madhav temples, and one of them is in Daraganj, which is called Veni Madhav, which most people go to. And I went to that one as well. But the one that's on the southern part of the confluence is known as Adi Veni Madhav, and it's probably the first one. And what's extraordinary is when you are in that mandir, the murtis, they are looking out at the Sangam. And literally, they're seeing the Sangam. The Sangam is seeing them, and they're seeing the Sangam. It's incredibly powerful. And I've got a video which I put on my Instagram of where I haven't actually shared it yet, but I will. Where literally I'm showing how their gaze is on the Sangam and vice versa. And hardly anybody goes there because they don't know. I mean, all of these you have tens of millions, hundreds of millions of people visiting Prayagraj, visiting Kumbh Mela, and hardly any of them are aware of the significance of some of these locations in the mandala. The Prajapati Kshetra or the Antavedi or the Prayag Mandala. These are the different names given to this kind of heart of Prayagraj, of the Sangam. And there are also other nags associated with the confluence as well, on the southern bank of Yamuna. So there is no doubt that we have this mound, we have this pillar, we have this Vasuki, we have the Nagas, and we have the association with Shiva as Akshayavat, the everlasting banyan tree, which is there right on the Sangam in the corner of Akbar's fort. They can all be visited. They all map onto texts. They all relate back to Samudra Manthan. Ganga Yamuna is there at the Gupta's 4th century cave temple in Udayagiri.
Yeah.
So is Samudra Manthan. But we have a gap for a millennium before it's kind of pulled together as the Samudra Manthan Kumbh Mela story.
Right. And there was one more thing, a well that also connects the ancient Saraswati River, something that
Saraswati Kumbh. Yeah.
Saraswati Kumbh, and that's also included in this entire. It's almost what you've described to us is such a fantastic description. Thank you so much for it. Is a cosmology. The mandala is the cosmos within this microcosm of Prayagraj that has been subsumed over there and expands in a similar way across the country, across the continent, across the subcontinent, and then across the continent possibly as well, because this mythology has been replicated in several other geographical locations as well. But what is fantastic is that this is the main core, the nucleus, right?
Absolutely. Prayagraj is the core of Indian civilization. As far as I mean, we talk about Harappa and Saraswati, and we talk about the Indus, and this is an incredibly important built environment, culture.
Yeah.
It's an urban civilization, which you obviously have explored.
Yes.
But prior to that, there was an agricultural revolution. Where did that happen? Well, the earliest archaeological evidence we have for burnt rice, which enables carbon dating, is near Prayag. It's either on the south side, or it's both on the south side of the confluence and on the east side in modern-day Junsi, previously Rajasthan Puri. So Professor Vaidyurya of Allahabad and I were looking at some of this rice and there's research in the last decade related to this, barley as well, 8,000 years before present. This is incredibly early agriculture.
Absolutely.
And what is that? And that's obviously means it predates the Indus Saraswati settlements. So 8,000 before present is Mehrgarh, Baluchistan kind of territories, but it's here right in the heart of India.
Yes.
And right in the heart of the subcontinent. And it's at the confluence. So what is a yagya? Well, in one way, you can think of the yagya ceremony as offering of value into Agni, for Agni and for the devas beyond. And when you're offering grains. we're offering yava, offering barley, offering akshat, offering rice,
Sesame, yeah.
sesame. We're offering products of the agricultural revolution.
Absolutely.
And yet we're always told, the Vedic people are pastoral nomads and it's all about goats and cows and sheep. And yes, of course, they have all of those, and those are also part of the rituals in the Veda. But yet the yagya is all agricultural products. They're not wild fruits.
No, they're not.
It's not honey and jamuns.
And this area, obviously Prayagraj and this general Ganga, Yamuna, Doab area is considered one of the most fertile areas in the world, primarily because of the number of rivers, rivulets, etc. coming here, and thus manipulating that landscape to actually produce food is not something that completely out of the ordinary at the time period that we're talking of. So this ancient history at Prayagraj is, I'm so glad you could share with us the archaeological significance of what remains and can be experienced even today. I want to now take you a little bit to the early medieval, pre-medieval, early medieval, and mid-medieval period, where we see actually a continuity of these mythologies. So when Akbar built his fort there, you saw that we noticed that the city was renamed into Allahabad, which
and then Allahabad by Shah Jahan.
And that translation is actually an ode to the historicity of the city. The translation of that word is an ode, and how he built physical infrastructure as well to kind of experience the city in the continuity of the religious traditions over there. What was your experience of that?
Great question. So power has always projected itself at the Sangam. And that's true today. And it's true going back for thousands of years. So whether Ashoka inscribed the pillar at Allahabad or at Kaushambi, that's maybe a separate conversation. But there's Ashoka obviously wanted to ascribe in the area, at least. Samudragupta, the same for the Guptas. Then when Shanzang visits in the 7th century, he's describing Harshvardhan giving away 5 years' worth of accumulated wealth to all the people present on the sands of charity, as they were known, which is the banks of Marganga underneath the modern day fort. So he was there. Then you have, as you describe, Akbar, who obviously has a Hindu wife, Jodabai. He's in 1583. This is the time when Narayana Bhatta is in 1854 starts the Kashi Vishwanath with Todamal. So it's a time when very much awareness of the importance of, and who is the author of the Trishali Setu, which is this book that has a section on Prayag. So everyone was fully aware of the importance of Prayag, the fact it was the Tirthraj, it was the most important place. And Jodabai would have known that, and Akbar would have known that. So it was important for projecting power both over Hindus, but also over the geography of the landscape, the Doab. So the main transport arteries are the Yamuna and Marganga. So you can have your boats going up to Agra, you can have your boats going up to Haridwar, to the Himalaya, you can go all the way down to Bengal, barges and boats. So it's physically important, geographically important, spiritually important, psychologically, politically. This is the place in the whole of India, if you want to project power, the most important place is Prayagraj, no doubt. Mm-hmm. And we give a couple more examples of that. We'll skip a bit and then we can come back. So Jahangir, 1600, declares independence from Akbar. He revolts against his father. Mm-hmm. Where does he declare himself emperor? Allahabad. So he's there he takes over Akbar's fort for 4 years. His son Khusro does the same thing to him. And Khusro Bagh is now in Allahabad, but there was a reconciliation, or I forget the details, but Khusro did the same thing to his father. I mean, Mughals were terrible children to their parents, and to say the least, and to their brothers and sisters. Anyway, let's not go there. So then if you go up to 1764, after the Battle of after the Battle of Buxar, the East India Company in 1765 go to Allahabad to sign the Treaty of Allahabad with Shah Alam and with Shuja Dula and so on, at the fort at the Sangam. And then in 1858, where does Canning read the Victoria Proclamation, which is declaring the end of the East India Company and the beginning of the British Raj, at Allahabad Fort in Prayagraj? In 1954, where does the first Prime Minister and the first President, Jawaharlal Nehru and Rajendra Prasad, are both at the Kumbh Mela in 1954. Rajendra Prasad has done Kalpvas 3 years in a row, and Nehru visits again. So throughout history, this has been a place where power has projected itself, associated itself. And like you say, Akbar spent, but I've read different estimates. It's hard I can't quite work it out. It's either 6 million or 10 million or 60 million rupees building Akbar's fort. The Taj Mahal 30 years later cost 30 million rupees. So it's either a third the cost of a Taj Mahal or twice the cost of a Taj Mahal building Akbar's fort. Huge investment. And that's for all of those reasons. And then potentially also because for Jodha by having a palace at the most spiritual and important place. So I don't know. Perhaps,
the greatest present he could give her. Right?
Yes. Yeah. I mean, why not? I mean, if you haven't been to Prayagraj, then having a palace at the Sangam seems like a good option. Some of the kids might have been
terrible to their fathers within the Mughal history, but some of the fathers were really romantic with their wives, don't you think?
Yes, particularly the Rajput wives.
Yes, I know. But yes, I think this is the part that gets me so excited about Prayagraj is the cosmology, the ancient cosmology of the place, and how the continuity on the reflection on how power is sort of assimilated and showcased over there. Everything that you shared is so fantastic. And now, bringing it back to your present day experience of.
Well, just let me give one example. I mentioned earlier of how inclusive and how easy it was to access. I think it needs to be said that unfortunately there is one very clear exception to this, which is that during the British East India Company rule in the first third of the 19th century, a pilgrim tax was levied on the Tirthyatris arriving at Kumbh Mela, and various different levels of tax based on if you arrived on a horse or a bullock cart or an elephant. And it was 1 rupee. Now, a rupee was enough to live for a month.
That's a lot of money.
So the East India Company, wickedly, I will say, put this tax on the pilgrims. And that's the only time in the history where you ever get a sense of exclusivity for access to the Sangam. And one of the reasons why we know this is that there was one collector or some other British official who described how disappointed he was because the crowds were so great at one point they had to let everyone in for free for a few hours.
It's disturbing how taxation was sort of used not only in India, around the world, on religious gatherings in that way, but rather wickedly, but also smartly, economically. I mean, that's what strengthened the empire, right? From the salt tax to the pilgrim tax.
The salt tax is absolute worst. The Great Hedge of India.
Do you know
literally
our last podcast was with the father of an artist, one of my favorite artists, Himali Singh Sohan, who has just done her performance piece on the Great Hedge of India. And I was helping her a little bit with fact-finding mission regarding that. And so fantastic was the story of the Great Hedge of India. Again, another wicked tax, but goes to speak towards what was happening at Prayagraj, at Prayag, where people were constantly coming there to experience and not only wash away their sins, but experience a cosmology that is much grander than our mundane lives, right? Now, if we may come back to the present day and to what is ongoing at the Kumbh, what are the biggest, despite this motivation, despite I'm going to get there, and all of us collectively feel that when we're going there. We've been watching the news as well, that that rarely tells this deep history of Prayag, of the Kumbh, of the historicity of this area, but instead, focuses on the difficulties that the common people are facing. And historically, there have been difficulties. I remember during Jawaharlal Nehru's rule as well. I think there was an uproar in Parliament when the facilities had been defeated a little bit during the extremely crowded times. And this time
800
too,
people died in a stampede in 1954.
that's right. And it became a matter of great debate at the Parliament, as it should be. And this time too, there has been many, many challenges. Could you tell us a little bit more about your lived experiences of those challenges that the people are facing there?
I wanted to visit Prayagraj as often as I could, and I also wanted to experience it as closely as I could to the way that a normal tirthyatri would. So I decided to use the trains, and I was aware, obviously, in 2013, the tragic accident that happened at Prayagraj Junction station, where people lost their lives. So I knew that there were risks attendant to anything involving a large crowd, whether it be, in a football stadium in England or in the streets of Korea or at an event like this in India. But so I took the trains. I took 6 trains, as in 3 return trips from New Delhi. One journey we weren't able to get tickets confirmed, and we ended up taking a train from Anand Vihar in East Delhi. But basically, I took all the trains from New Delhi and to Prayagraj Junction. The train journeys were all really comfortable. I mean, I did a 3AC, a 2AC, and a CC. So one of them I had to move around a bit because I only had part tickets to Kanpur and then Kanpur to Prayagraj, but they weren't overcrowded. They were normal train journeys. The stations were a little bit busier. Obviously, what happened this last few days in New Delhi station is completely tragic. Those were the platforms that I was using for all my journeys. 16 I did one or two I did on Vande Bharat, and then the other ones were on, which is platform 16, Ajmeri Gateside, and the other ones were on platform 15, 14, which is where this tragic accident, I believe, from what I understand, happened. The platforms obviously can get crowded, and when trains are cancelled, and then if announcements are made that perhaps confuse the passengers, I could easily see myself being there and hearing Prayagraj Special, Prayagraj Express. Oh, that's our train. We need to go to platform. We need to change platform.
It's confusing.
Yeah. And I'm sure that there will be an investigation and protocols put in place to ensure that doesn't happen again. Mm-hmm. You solve one problem and then another, and then there's another one the next time. Last time, as I mentioned in 2013, it was to do with the footbridge in Allahabad Junction, as it was known then. In 1954, it was along the Akara Marg on the Sangam nose, where pilgrims were trying to cross, and some people came under elephants. And I don't think I saw any elephants this year at Kumbh Mela.
Right.
Which, I don't know which Kumbh Mela they stopped having elephants. And if anyone can let me know, I would be very interested. But and maybe I was wrong. Maybe I did. Maybe there were some, but I don't think there were any elephants. I saw there were camels and horses, but most of the Mahalandeshwars were on and Mahants were on tractors and that kind of vehicle. If they were going to be on a rut, a chariot like thing, they were on that rather than an elephant. And that was a key trigger in the 1954 stampede, was people running between elephants and sadhus getting in way and it. So it always happens. Everything happens differently. On the night of Paush Purnima Makar Sankranti, I was on the Sangam nose. I took Snaan 2-3 in the morning, in the darkness. Although there's a lot of lighting there, it's very bright, but it was nighttime. It was cold. We took off our clothes. We went in. We bathed. We took Snaan. We did some rituals as we could. We didn't have pundits with us, so it was more kind of people just doing their own thing. Typically, the Prayagraj, the river pandas, are on the actual bridge of boats rather than at the Sangam nose. I slept for a while there, or lay down on the straw on the Sangam nose. We were there the whole night. A wonderful group of about 9 of us. We felt safe. There was a beautiful atmosphere. Everyone was very friendly, very excited. There was a lot of joy. My experience after that Snaan was and I've got video on my Instagram of this. It was a very genuine bliss. It was a beautiful, very powerful. Really beautiful, very wonderful, joyful experience. And that's because of the people around, the atmosphere. So it was a great atmosphere. Then we waited there for another couple of hours until the sadhus, the Naga sadhus, would start arriving in the Akaras in their Peshwai, their procession down the Akara Marg. And we were right up on the bamboo fencing so that we could see them. So I was, I was touched by sadhus on the way through. We were that close. And my understanding of the tragic event that happened on the Sangam nose on Mauni Amavasya was that it was essentially exactly at that place. So having been there the whole of a night before a Shahi Snan, I know what it must have been like on Mauni Amavasya. And my understanding is that what happened was, people came through into an empty space, maybe that encouraged others to rush through. Then you all think you're going in one direction, and then there are people ahead of you, and to be honest, you don't stand a chance if a crowd is rushing towards. I don't know the exact details. What I do know is that when you're in these crowds, you are moving like water. The people are we talk about Ma Ganga, Ma Yamuna. Well, there is one way of thinking of Ma Saraswati manifesting as the consciousness within the sadhus, or even within us, as we form that third river entering the Sangam. And you think of what Saraswati represents in terms of language and culture and all that flows. Well, the third river, perhaps metaphorically, is us, the crowd.
Yeah.
And when we are flowing, nothing stops water. And it's very hard to, once something happens, whether it's in 1954 running out in front of elephants, or whether it was in this year running into open space towards the Snaan, towards the Sangam nose. So without being there, I can't obviously shed light on exactly what happened, but I can say that it's a beautiful atmosphere, and when something can go wrong, that can obviously change to horror in an instant.
Absolutely.
And it must be absolutely terrifying. I had one instance where I was in a quite serious crush, and I decided to abort. So instead of carrying on with what I thought was getting riskier, I decided to just turn around and gave up on the particular journey I was going on. So I think that's all I can really say. We woke up on Mauni Amavasya 4:30 in the morning. We came down to Arel Ghat. We got onto boats, and it was only when we were on boats heading towards the Sangam that we started to understand that something had happened on the Sangam nose. And the Snaan that we took on Mauni Amavasya was therefore very, very different to the one on Makar Sankranti and on Posh Purnima, because we knew that there were people who wanted to be there who weren't, because they'd tragically died. And the rituals that one does particularly on Mauni Amavasya, are Turpan, they are for ancestors. And I'm sure many, if not all of those people were thinking that that's what they were doing. They were doing an act which wasn't just for themselves attaining moksha or being cleansed of their sins.
Generations gone and generations to come.
But they were doing something for their ancestors. There's a lovely line in the Ganga Vakya Vali by Queen Vishveshva Devi. where she describes how the devas and the pitras, the gods and the ancestors, are singing to encourage you to come to the Sangam at Prayag. This idea that, it's not just you that wants to go there, but the gods and
summoning you.
Your ancestors are summoning you.
Calling you. That brings me to what I did want to get into next is definitely going to any of the 4 locations alongside Prayagraj, Haridwar and such, is generally for us South Asians and for many who visit from outside South Asia considered a time of cleansing, purification. But what have you learned, and how did all of these snans, these 6 snans that you undertook over there at different times of the astrological calendar that have such deep meaning and such important times of the year, what impact did it have on your mental and emotional state and well-being? What did it do for you after you undertook this?
Well, each of them was very different, and I'm incredibly privileged. I mean, I just can't believe how lucky I am that I've been able to safely go there and come back, as have my friends and family, and as have hundreds of millions of people. But also that I've just been able to have the opportunity in the first place to do it. So that you mentioned the astronomical significance. I think we haven't yet mentioned this, but or we haven't yet explored this. But we've all been talking about Guru Brihaspati entering Vrishabh, Jupiter entering into Taurus, and that being the celestial clock that tells us Kumbh Mela is happening at Prayagraj.
Yeah.
And the 12-year cycle of Jupiter means that happens once every 12 years, and we've entered into that 12th year. That's why Prayagraj. The second calendar is that of the sun, Surya, and Surya entering Makka Sankranti, the movement into Makka, Surya, the sun, entering Capricorn, marking the beginning of the solar month of Magh and the beginning of the Kumbh Mela. And the lunar calendar, so that's the second celestial clock. And then the third one is the lunar celestial clock, which begins with Posh Purnima, the full moon of prior to Magh. And then the countdown to Mauni Amavasya. Mauni Amavasya is the big bathing day, the most auspicious Snaan day. It was 29th of January this year. And then it counts on to Magh Purnima. So Magh Purnima is the end of the 29-day lunar cycle. It's the day when the Kalpvasis can break their fast, and they can take their Snaan and they can complete their 30 days. So you had a really interesting synchronicity this year, which I don't think people have talked about. And please correct me if I'm wrong and share me some links to this, because it's so obvious that I'm surprised. But everyone's been so interested with the alignment of the grahas, of the planets.
Correct.
And the fact that on the run up to Mauni Amavasya, we had this yoke, this conjunction alignment. But what really is powerful and important, and from the texts that I've been reading, the actual deeper tradition is the Magh Mela. This is all about the month of Magh. Now, there are 2 months of Magh. There are the solar and there are the lunar. The solar begins on Makar Sankranti and ends on Kumbh Sankranti, when Surya enters into Aquarius, Kumbh. And the lunar Magh begins, in North India at least, on Posh Purnima, the full moon, and ends on Maghi Purnima, the full moon. Begins the day after Posh Purnima and ends on Magh Purnima. This year is the first year that a Magh Mela on a 12-year Mahakumbh Mela cycle has happened, where those lunar and solar Magh calendars have synchronized. So the day after Posh Purnima this year was Makar Sankranti. So the first day of the lunar month of Magh was the first day of the solar month of Magh. And the last day of Magh was Magh Purnima, which was the same day as Kumbh Sankranti, the sun moving into Kumbh. So that meant that those Posh Purnima, Makar Sankranti, day one, the Mauni Amavasya in the middle, and the Magh Purnima and Kumbh Sankranti on the final day were all synced up this year for the month of Magh, and I was fortunate to be there for all of those. And the difference between the snans, you asked this lovely question about the psychological or emotional. First one was pure joy, Anand bliss, that first night. Then there was one where I was just overwhelming sense of gratitude. Then I was with my wife, my daughter. So that was just all about family and togetherness and sharing and the fact that we're on this journey of life together. Then with my brother, he came out from England, which gave a chance for us to kind of reconnect in this very special, once in a lifetime experience.
Yeah.
We live on other sides of the world, but here we were, Sangam, two coming together for a moment. And then the final one, in the sense of, this is, the closure of, gosh, what's gone through. I have many sins. I'm not entirely sure whether I've been cleansed of any of them, but I wasn't actually asking or thinking of anything in any of these snans other than sheer gratitude, sheer thanks for everything that has led me here. My parents, teachers, my wife, my daughter, my friends, my family. I even remembered landlords. I thought, your landlords provides you a home. Oh. So I was just overwhelmed with thanks and gratitude.
That's wonderful. And I think with this, I want to go on to our last question before we close today's podcast. I mean, I can go on. I have many questions, and especially about this. One of the wonderful things you said is, at the confluence of three rivers, essentially there was a confluence of three different astronomical moments. How it's the cosmology of all of this, the planning of all of this, and the biggest human gathering in the world of all of this is so powerful, and I'm so jealous that you got to experience all of this. I really should not be having what seems like a negative emotion, but I'm so excited that you got to experience it and share it with us so intimately, And having said that, what do you think, as a person who's lived across societies and cultures, what do you think the rest of the world can understand, and not in a patronizing way, but learn from something like the Kumbh Mela that happens in India? Something about, and it doesn't necessarily have to be about spirituality, but just about what's happening out here is something so special, so deep, so difficult to describe. But what can the world sort of understand from it?
However ingenious Elon Musk's robots are going to be, however clever ChatGPT is going to be, if we can combine the two, which I'm sure is, we're on the verge of, I could never see the robots of the world say, you know what, Margay, Prayagraj, let's go and take a Snaan. This is what it is to be human. Mm-hmm. This is the difference between human intelligence, experience, spiritual intelligence, emotional intelligence, and, artificial intelligence and kind of all that stuff. It's about experiencing through the heart, through the senses. I mean, going into cold water, having the risks, the tapasya of the effort, the pain in your feet as you're walking for kilometer after kilometer or mile after mile. All of that is something that only a human can feel. Mm-hmm. And if the intention is giving thanks, is apologizing, is seeking blessings for one's family or ancestors or the community, if there's a purity of intention, then again, this is what it is to be human. So the world has so much to learn from you have the sadhus are extraordinary, that they've renounced family and household. They have each other, and they have their tapasya, and they have their teachings, but they've obviously given up so much that the comforts that we are used to in order to focus on their life. So they are obviously inspiring. Hard to imagine how they can do what they do, but they do.
Mm-hmm.
But for me, it's the Kalpvasi and then the Tirthyatris. I kind of am a Tirthyatri. I've done this 6 times. I've taken the trains, I've walked, I've snarned, I've done it.
Yeah.
I am a pilgrim, no doubt. But the Kalpvasis are the ones who I think I have the most respect and
how would you describe
love
the
for.
Kalpvasis in English?
Kalpvasis are people like you, Annika, and me. They are. It's like you and your husband or me and my wife saying, right, let's go to Prague and let's spend a month sleeping on the banks of Malganga, on straw, on sand, with a blanket, and take 3 snans a day, and cook for ourselves and eat simply. And I have just huge respect for those people who are essentially just like us, who are willing to put themselves through that. And I am sure it's enormously enriching and empowering for them. And I'm sure that they then go back to their families and their lives with having had a truly transformational experience. And I would love to, now that Mahakumbh is over, to be able to meet some of those people who have actually done that. And having spoken to some of them during that process, talk to them when they're out the other side, when they've returned to their normal lives, having had this experience. So the world has a huge amount: organization, temporary cities, logistics, but it's really this allowing the heart and allowing the senses and allowing what makes us human to find expression. And all of it at this extraordinary Kumbh Mela is focused on nature. It's focused on these beautiful, life-giving rivers, on the sun, the heavens, the cycles which we're part of, whether they be seasonal or celestial. And, there's the Akshayavat's a tree. It's not about anything more than something which, 10,000 years ago we could have experienced. And one hopes in 10,000 years' time we can too.
And I think that's a great note to close this episode. I think if both of you and me can think about great gratitude for the great rivers for hosting one of the biggest human gatherings in the world, in the universe, and with the hope that the rivers may recuperate from the experience that they've given all of us. And thank you so much for sharing this most intimate experience with us. And I've been so delighted to speak to you. And don't mind me if I continue talking to you after the podcast even gets over. But thank you for coming today, Nick. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much, Annika. Har har Gange.